The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with Ed McBain. I'm Bruce Southworth, a mystery book reviewer for Publishers Weekly and Drood Review of Mysteries. Ed McBain has won the Mystery Writers of America Grand Master Award and is the author of over 100 novels, either as Ed McBain or under his own name, Evan Hunter. Of the 87th Precinct novels, the most recent, Romance, the 46th in that series, was just published April of 1995 by Warner Books. Another popular series features attorney Matthew Hope. The 11th in that series was published in 1994, There Was a Little Girl. As Evan Hunter, his works have shown great diversity, starting with The Blackboard Jungle in 1954 through The Chisholms in 1976 to Lizzie in 1984, about the famous Lizzie Borden case in the late 1890s. He's written short stories, children's stories, screenplays, including Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and Strangers When We Meet and Fuzz, both of those being based on his own novels. And in March of 1995, NBC Television aired the first of Ed McBain's 87th Precinct series, starring Randy Quaid as Detective Steve Carella. It is a great honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much.
I'm very happy to be here.
Romance is a delightfully fun book. It seems to have so many different levels. The aspect of, well, let's probably start to describe it better, I guess, first. There is a group of actors in a play called Romance, and they are rehearsing a play called Romance within that. And the lead actress is stabbed, but not fatally. And then at a later date, she is stabbed fatally, which brings in Bert Kling and Detective Steve Carella and so on. And at another level, we have the relationship of Bert Kling with a new lady in his life, Deputy Chief Surgeon Sharon Cook.
Who, if she knows anything about his history, should run for the hills immediately.
But it's one of the things that I really kind of liked about the book is that it doesn't seem to be as much police procedural, if you will. I mean, the 87th Precinct series seems to have that genre, but it's more of a kind of a novel of relationships, a lot of relationships among people.
Yeah, and the mystery in it is more of a pure mystery than some of the books preceding it have been. You know, where there's a it could take place in an Agatha Christie drawing room, where there is the cast of characters, all the people involved in the production of this play, and all of them are suspects, more or less. And, you know, where was Uncle Charlie in the dining room when so-and-so was killed in the potting shed, that sort of thing. So it's a purer mystery than some of the others. It's also, as you mentioned a bit earlier, a more lighthearted mystery than I've been writing of late. I guess starting with the book called Lullaby, and I don't know when that was, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, where a baby and her sitter are killed on New Year's Eve. The book started to take on a much darker tone, a more pessimistic look at American life, if you will. A sort of cranky, grouchy view. And I don't know what suddenly, maybe I'm happier these days, or it's certainly not because Newt Gingrich is at the helm there, but I may be happier these days, and this book, I think, reflects it. It's springtime in the 87th Precinct, and flowers are blooming, and romance is blooming, and and the play is a lousy play with a lousy actor and a lousy actress, and
a lousy writer.
A lousy writer, incidentally. And so I had a lot of fun writing the book, and I think it shows in the pages.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the delights. Is it seems as though you're almost taking some fun stabs at the no pun intended, sorry, the theatrical people, as well as writers in general, as well as the mystery genre.
I figured if I did a number on the director and the producer and the various actors and actresses in the play, that I couldn't really spare the writer. So he comes off as a bit of a pretentious oaf as well, you know.
Well, I love the scene where he's talking about having written novels about cops, and
Yeah.
and they're saying police procedurals, no, novels about cops.
Yes.
And in some respects, actually, this is that. It's a novel about cops, as I said.
Yes,
It's
but in
less-
another place, the director asked him, "Do you like cops?" He says, "Yes, I do." He says, "Well, nobody else does." He says, "I don't believe that." He says, "Believe it, nobody in the world likes cops." You know? So that was a lot of fun. That part of the book was a great deal of fun. And of course, I wanted to deal, I wanted to deal with a very serious problem in America today, black-white relations. And I thought, we always deal with it in terms of labels, black, white. And I thought if I could reduce it to just two people, Bert Kling and Sharon Cook, and see if they can come together.
The questions that they ask of each other in their own minds, really, as they go along, I think are very revealing of, just two people trying to sort things out. I like the comment at one point where, I don't remember exactly what happened, but he said, he's thinking, I bet she thinks I'm dumb because I said, and she's thinking exactly the same thing at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just such an interesting relationship. How did you? I understand. I read somewhere that you were reading a book. What's it called? Black English.
Black English.
Was that in research
Not
for
a
this?
book. Yeah, many books.
Many books?
About Black English. I wanted to do a scene. I don't know who told me this. I think I was having a problem with my voice, as I'm having now after a book tour, and I went to a voice therapist who was giving me exercises, that kind of jazz. And I don't know how we got onto this, but she mentioned something about code switching. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "It's what blacks will occasionally do they'll switch to an impenetrable black English that's almost a patois in order to be not understood by the white man." And I thought, that's interesting, and I went to the library. She gave me a list of some books to look for. She gave me some pamphlets, etc. on Black English. And then I went to the library and got tons of material on Black English. And it really is very hard to understand. And it occurs not only in the ghetto, but among educated and professional blacks. They will sometimes unconsciously switch to Black English. And I wanted to do a scene in the book. It became something else, because I couldn't master the Black English. As hard as I tried, I could understand what was going on and its roots in African tribes and all that, but I couldn't make it impenetrable. And I wanted it to be impenetrable so that Kling, the white cop, would feel excluded from the conversation. Instead, I had a conversation between Sharon Cook, who's a deputy chief surgeon and a doctor, between her and another doctor about someone who was injured, and this excludes Kling. This makes him feel outside.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about the relationship is, at least it struck me this way, that Kling isn't so concerned, at least it doesn't seem, that she's black initially, is that she outranks him, which I think is kind of interesting in terms of the police relating to each other.
Yeah, she's more concerned about the fact that he's white, or at least so it seems at this early stage of the relationship. We may discover later on, if this relationship indeed continues into other books, that there are more layers to this than we suspect, and that Kling may really be prejudiced. I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't know. Or unconsciously prejudiced, and this may be a thing between them if the relationship continues. That's up to them, not me. But I see a lot of levels here that I can explore, and a lot of levels that relate to the way white people and black people actually view each other in America. You know, I really feel that unless we really come to grips with this sooner or later, it's been a long time now, to be kicking this around the block.
Yeah.
And we've got to get together, or we're gonna fall apart. The whole nation will fall apart.
Yeah, communication is absolutely essential, and I think about that dialogue, that patois that you were talking about, being impenetrable. Sometimes it seems like it's a purposeful switch, you know, that people do that in order to tune you out, and somehow we have to try and eliminate the need
Well,
for
sure,
people
it's
to go
called
into
code switching.
code switching. Yeah,
They switched to a code.
yeah.
It's a code that we don't understand. White people don't understand.
Hmm. Go ahead.
No, I was only going to say that I hope they do get the. Well, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but you know, throughout it's a real. They're really struggling to find a way to find some common ground in this thing.
Absolutely, and it also kind of calls into question for Steve Carella his relationship with Bert Kling to some extent, because you know he's a little bit concerned that Bert hasn't kind of fully informed him of the lady that he's dating, the new love in his life, being that they're partners, being all and share all. You know, he finds it a little bit odd that he's talked to Artie Brown about that, but not him. That's kind of interesting too. It's just shifting going on.
Yeah,
kind of interesting.
and you know, Carella wonders, does Kling think that I would be upset that he's dating a black woman? What does he think of me anyway?
Yeah.
And of course, because the race relationship is important to the book, I had to bring in a bigot, you know, Fat Ollie Weeks from the other books, to point that aspect of it up. There's a wonderful scene where it's a scene of another murder in the book, and there are two black cops from another precinct investigating the murder when Fat Ollie Weeks arrives on the scene. And he says he's reading the guy's ID from his card, clipped to his lapel, and I forget what the cop's name is now, the black detective's name, Henry or something. And Fat Ollie Weeks says, why don't you just go home, Henry? And he makes it sound like a racial slur, you know, why don't you just go home, Henry?
Yeah, he's a very despicable character. He seems to be hateful no matter, you know, what you are, whether it be male, female, black, white, you know.
Oh, he's a equal employer racist. He hates everything. He's just a bigot all the way down the line. It doesn't matter whether you're Jewish or black or Italian. He hates anything that isn't Ollie Weeks.
He has an interesting section of dialogue, though, with one of the actors in the play, Mark Riganti, who I think was kind of interesting, had a little bit of a resume in there, having acted in several real movies, which were all movies based on your novels or movies that you had done the screenplays for, which I love the way you blur the reality and the fiction of that. But is their dialogue of how to conduct an interrogation or an interview.
It's a very funny scene,
yeah.
I thought.
Yeah, it was delightful. I've seen it excerpted somewhere, that particular section.
Really?
Yeah. I don't remember offhand where it was.
He picks, Fat Ollie Weeks comes to question him, and he's rehearsing, he's reading the lines in a scene where he's interrogating a woman and a suspect. Because the characters in the play are called the detective, the actress, the playwright, whatever. And so he starts picking Ollie's brain about how would you conduct this investigation, and Ollie, of course, is, you know, he doesn't have an approach, or he doesn't prepare. He's just a cop, and it's a very funny scene.
It is very
where
good.
Ollie is telling him how he would do the thing.
I want to go back to something that you said a little bit earlier about the characters and what they're doing, and you don't know. Other authors that I've had the pleasure of talking with have said that to a varying degree, the characters that are in their books completely take over and do very, very surprising things. They have absolutely no idea what's going on, and that for them, when they actually hit the word processor, they're in whatever physical location that the book is taking place. They're there, they're kind of observing and just sort of keystroking, if you will, while everything is happening around them. They're writing it down. Is that the way that you're writing?
Most of the time. I'll start a novel. I usually start a novel with a title. And I use that as the inspiration and also as the focus throughout, so that I'll know if the title of the book is romance and I start straying too far afield, I'll say, hey fella, the title is romance, let's get back to romance and various romances and the play and whatever. But I normally will jump right in and they either start with a body or someone about to become a body. and go from there. And I'll carry it as far as my invention and energy will go, and then I'll stop. And I'll say, well, where are we now? On the computer, I will almost talk to myself, a dialogue with myself. Well, where are we now? What do we know? What has happened? It's sort of an outline in retrospect. And what do the cops need to know? Where are they going to go from here? What's going to happen next? And I'll outline maybe 1 or 2 chapters ahead.
Okay.
And move them into that and see where that takes them, because things happen, you know. People arrive on the scene and it changes the entire perspective. And you know, I didn't know when I sent Eileen, Sharon and Kling on the first date, I didn't know that she was going to get up and suggest that they go home instead of going to a movie, that she was going to say it's late and good night, I had a nice time. I didn't know that.
Just the direction and the feel of where they were taking.
Yeah, I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, well, he said something at the table that bothered her.
As so often happens.
Yeah, and she said, you know, it's been a nice night and let's call it a night. Good night. So, but I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought maybe I might play the first date and they get along fine. He says, can I see you again? And whatever. I didn't know that was going to happen until it happened.
Do you, as far as when you're writing and you've got, you know, outlining a little bit ahead, you've got an idea to start with. When in all of that do you start to do some research? I know you've got an awful lot of background in this, so you probably, you know, have a great head start on a lot of it. But if you need to research something in particular,
well, in this particular book, I'm trying to think of some of the things that I had to research. The DNA, I had to research. This came toward the end of the book, of course. I had to research the kind of a deal a DA would cut with someone who's being charged with a crime, and how they go about that so that it seems realistic. Let me think of some of the other things in the book. I had to research all the warrant when Teddy Corella gets in trouble with the law.
Oh, right.
That was research in the warrant, what they were charging her with and how she has to appear and all that.
The very specific.
That was research. Yeah, very specific. In other books, what I will do, I'll sort of wing it. If I have to do a scene, as an example, where a fighter pilot is flying an F-14 or whatever he's flying, I'll wing it. He grabbed for the schmear case and pulled it back toward the aperture, and then switched the trigger from it on the Kramis, and then I'll research it after that, so that I am actually in the cockpit of the plane and know where all the levers are and what the control panel looks like and all that. But I'll go for the content of the scene rather than the details of it, and then fill that in later. Or very often I'll just write scene missing. If I don't know a scene on a boat, for example, and I know the details of the boat and it's too complicated to fake, I will just put scene missing, and I'll say Matthew Hope sailing the boat across the Sound, and come back to that later.
Okay, interesting. Now, I understand that in the past too, you've done a lot of traveling with police on the beat. Do you still do that at all?
No, not any longer.
Not any longer?
I stopped doing that one night in Houston. I was doing a pilot for a film about a movie. It was a pilot for what was going to be a television series about the Houston police. And I was riding with them and trying to find out what they were all about. The cops are pretty much the same, you know, all over the United States. There's the same mentality, same among many of them, honor, sense of honor and obligation to the job, and a desire to make a change. You hear a lot of cops say that. I'm in this because I want to make a change. And but I was riding with them at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we got a man with a gun call. And we pulled up. It was a convenience store in a very bad neighborhood, and the woman was hysterical because the guy had come back twice that night with a gun and threatened her, and he was in the alley with the gun. And we got out of the car, and the 2 cops in the car and me, and they drew their guns, and we head into the alley, and I suddenly realized that there were 3 guys with guns there, and I was the only one without a gun. And I thought, I don't really have to do this anymore. And I went back to the car and sat in the car. And I thought, I know, I don't have to get the feel of cops anymore. I have the feel, you know, and I know how they work. No more alleys.
Sounds like a very, very safe approach to take. And
well,
you know.
I think so, maybe. If there were things I felt I could learn by riding with them again, but I know the way they talk, I know the way they think. And the only stuff I try to keep up with is all the scientific advances that one has to know in order to write accurately about policemen.
Okay. Speaking of scientific advances, I wanted to ask you. I just read in one of our local papers a reference to someone saying that there was a book called The Turner Diaries in 1978, and they made the comment about this book being a source of inspiration for the Oklahoma City federal building bombing, which is now just a little over a week ago. And I know that there's been some comment about one of the, some information in one of your books as being related to the sarin attack in Japan. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering if you think it's reasonable to assign that kind of causality to a book.
I'm not sure. Let me explain what happened first, so people don't think I'm behind the gas attack in the Tokyo subways.
We don't want to convey that impression.
I wrote a novel called Scimitar.
Scimitar.
And I used a pseudonym on it because I wanted to try an experiment. I wanted to see if I could write a good book and not be Evan Hunter or Ed McBain, but John Abbott, and see what would happen. See if anything would happen at all. If the publishers were committed to advertising it, and which they were, and see if it would fly. And it didn't. It was just, it got good reviews, and it was a good thriller. It was not a cop novel. It was or a mystery in any sense. It was a novel of intrigue and suspense. And it was published in Japan about 9 months ago. That would have made it, well, what's 9 months from April of '95? Back in whenever. October of last year? September of last year? And immediately following publication, almost immediately following publication in Japan, in a little prefecture some 90 miles north of Tokyo, someone released sarin, the nerve gas. And in the book, the assassin's weapon of choice is nerve gas, sarin, which he makes in his own kitchen from chemicals he has purchased in much the same way that I purchased them when I was trying to find out if it could be done.
And you purchased them with no problem?
Oh no, none at all.
That's
well,
scary.
some of them were rather simple. You know, some of the ingredients were alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, which has no water in it, because water is the deadly enemy of sarin. It destroys the gas. So those I understood how I could order from a chemical supply house without any problem. But the deadly ingredient in sarin, I also ordered that from a chemical supply house. I called. I gave them my corporate credit card number. They asked me did I want it 1 day FedEx or 2. I said 1 day. And they called about 20 minutes later, I guess, but I had already coached my secretary, and they wanted to know what we were going to use it for. And she said, oh, I don't know, I'm new here. And then he said, well, can you tell me a little bit about what you do? I said, oh yeah, they conduct a lot of experiments here. And he said, do you know what this is going to be used for and what experiment? She said, I think they're trying to induce cancer in white mice. Okay? And that was that. And they sent it. It arrived the next day, marked hazardous material. It was a sealed ampule of this highly toxic material, a sealed ampule, not with a cap that you could unscrew, but you would have to use a glass cutter to cut off the top of the cap. And there it was. I wasn't foolish enough. I now had all the ingredients I needed to make sarin, including stuff I had got from the hardware store, solvent that would not destroy any of the other chemicals. And I wasn't foolish enough to try to make it because, I know if you get a drop on your hand, fini. but it could be done. The thing I did in the book, although I gave a formula in the book purporting to be the formula for sarin, the key ingredient, the one I ordered from a chemical supply firm, was I changed it into a non-existent chemical. I worked with a research chemist, and I changed it. We invented a non-existent chemical, which if you tried to make sarin with that, it just wouldn't work. It's like 2 + 2 = 5. There's no such chemical, so you can't make it. You know, it's like H2O instead of H2O.
Okay.
It's impossible. Except it was very much more complicated than just changing a simple thing. It was just non-existent. But nonetheless, the Japanese linked it to the book. And they thought it was a copycat who had taken the formula from the book and used it.
Yeah.
And then they spoke to me. They spoke to John Abbott in any case. And then the big thing happened in the Japanese subway, you know, with a lot of people getting hurt and killed and injured. And then I really got concerned, and I thought I better tell them I'm Evan Hunter and that, you know, explain exactly what happened so that they'd know I was not responsible for this. As it turned out, I was not anyway.
It's very interesting. I think I remember reading a comment that you had made at one time that the terrorist mentality, terrorists are terrorists, they're going to figure out how to make this stuff some way or another. They're not.
They know how. I mean, I don't have to tell terrorists how to make sarin. They know how to make it already.
Yeah.
As the cult had, what, how many gallons of it in their basement with actual guys making it in the lab, not on a kitchen table. So they know how to do this.
Yeah.
Terrorists know how to do whatever they want to do, as has become evident in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, which, and again, I guess it goes back to perhaps it's kind of specious to assign, you know, an origin of that to in a particular book.
Although, you know, Bruce, in World War II, when they were doing creating the atomic bomb at Los Alamos, a guy came out with a book detailing how to make an atomic bomb while they were still developing it. And rap, a knock on his door. The FBI is visiting him. How do you know about this? They thought he was tapping into Los Alamos.
And he'd just come up with an independent...
He had just, invented it himself.
That's kind of scary, kind of intriguing in and of itself. We're kind of rapidly running out of time here. We've just got about a minute or so left.
Shall I sing a little?
If you want, that'd be fine. We can go out on a high note or a low note, as the case may be. But I wanted to ask what you're working on now, very briefly. We've got about 30 seconds or so left.
I have an Evan Hunter novel coming out next February of '96 called Privileged Conversation. And I'm working on a new novel about the lawyer Matthew Hope. I have about 200 pages, and I don't know when that'll be published, but I'm going to finish it and turn it in.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to both of them. Ed McBain, the new novel is Romance. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Good being here, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.